November 1965. Legendary comedian and film director Charlie Chaplin holds a press conference at Savoy Hotel in London. The event has been organized to announce Chaplin's upcoming film A Countess from Hong Kong. Also present is Sophia Loren, the film's heroine. 13 months later the film will premiere in London. The highly publicized, expensive Technicolor film will also be a critical and box office disaster and the last film Chaplin will make. In the mid-1960s, Chaplin hadn't made a film in nearly 9 years, an unusually long hiatus even for the meticulous and slow filmmaker. It was while looking into new projects that Chaplin dusted off an unfinished screenplay written decades earlier. A Countess from Hong Kong dates back as far as the mid-1930s. At that point, Chaplin wrote a screenplay called Stowaway and was considering it as a vehicle for Paulette Goddard and co-starring Gary Cooper. However, the film eventually came to nothing. Apparently Chaplin had used much of the old Stowaway script when planning A Countess from Hong Kong 3 decades later. The screenplay was inspired by Russian refugees Chaplin had met during a trip to the Far East in the 1930s. The story takes place in post-war Hong Kong, in which there are refugees from the Russian Revolution and the Second World War. Some of the former royalty are working as dancehall girls. One of them is Countess Natasha Alexandrov, played by Sophia Loren. She meets Ogden Mears, an American ambassador and son of an oil magnate, and stows away in his suite on a ship, aspiring to get to America. For the first time, Chaplin was using major stars and considered casting either Rex Harrison or Cary Grant for the role of the ambassador. In the end, he chose Marlon Brando, whose acting he admired.
Are you crazy?
Dame Margaret Rutherford, well known for her portrayal as Miss Marple, was cast in a small role as a dotty passenger. For the part of Hudson the valet, Chaplin considered Noel Coward and Peter Sellers until, partly due to scheduling problems, he decided against using an all-star cast. Patrick Cargill would end up playing the part instead.
Thanks for calling, Hudson.
The smallish role of Ogden Mears' wife went to Tippi Hedren, best known for her roles in Hitchcock's films The Birds and Marnie.
Well, unfortunately, Ogden, the only interest I have is money, having had no children.
Chaplin's son Sidney would also feature in a major supporting role.
That's the first time I've seen you smile since we've been on this trip.
And Chaplin himself would make a small cameo appearance, playing an old steward who is struck by seasickness. Comedy and romance of the story arises from the stowaway situation, which is complicated by attempts to keep the presence of the Countess hidden from the ship's purser. Adding twists to the plot are an arranged marriage of convenience between the Countess and Hudson the valet, difficulties with documentation, and an unscheduled appearance of Ogden's estranged wife. For the first time, Chaplin was making a feature film with the backing from a major studio, Universal Pictures. A Countess from Hong Kong would be shot in London at Pinewood Studios by Universal's European unit. The filming started on January the 25th, 1966 at Pinewood Studios. Nearly all of the film was shot in the studio, except some second unit material filmed on a real ship, as well as footage from Hong Kong and Hawaii. The film's pre-title sequence, taking place in a Hong Kong dance hall, was filmed in a converted shop in London. The making of A Countess from Hong Kong was almost immediately marred by bad relations. Marlon Brando turned out late for the shoot and was greeted by a furious Chaplin. There are differing accounts as to how the argument was resolved, but the tension between the two remained, despite their mutual admiration for each other as artists. There were tensions between the main leads as well. Sophia Loren and Marlon Brando had a hard time finding the right mood together. Loren was appalled when, before the shooting, Brando had fallen asleep during a script conference. As a consequence, the filming was an unhappy experience for Brando, who disliked the finished product, and Chaplin's treatment of his son Sidney, calling it sadistic. Lorraine and Chaplin had a smoother working relationship, and she said she would appear in a minute's notice in another film of his, even if he decided to film London Phone Book. Some might say he should have filmed the phone book instead. There were great differences in acting styles too. Lorraine was basically a technical actor who'd assume a role and step before the camera. Marlon Brando, on the other hand, was more in tune with the style called the method acting, in which he needed to know the character's motivations and experience the required feeling that was portrayed. When the filming started, it was clear that this approach would not be needed. Chaplin was famous for playing out each part by himself and asking his actors to duplicate this performance. He would give precise instructions on timing and movement, how many steps to take before turning, or how to deliver a line. This experience frustrated Brando, who compared himself to a glorified marionette. A Countess from Hong Kong marked Chaplin's first film in color. The color palette of the film is deliberately very toned down, consisting mostly of earthy tones of browns and yellows. The color red is especially sparingly used. The film was also Chaplin's first film in widescreen, and even though Chaplin preferred the smaller canvas, the film, shot by Arthur Ibbotson, uses the width of the frame quite effectively, often having tight compositions that fill the whole frame. Chaplin is famous or notorious for his simplistic camera setups. A technician working on A Countess from Hong Kong remarked that whereas other directors would mark each camera placement on the studio floor with a mark made with tape, Chaplin would have the mark for each setup painted on the floor, so that each time the action in the same room was filmed from the same predetermined spots. This shows Chaplin's belief that by repeating the same simple camera angles, the filmmaker has a better chance of establishing the layout of the place in which the film is set and the movement of the actors in that space. The aim of this utilitarian view is to avoid distracting the viewer. On the other hand, this has the effect of accentuating the staginess of the already stage-bound film. As a result of this aesthetic, Chaplin uses the moving camera sparingly, even less than in his previous films. Most tracking shots are meant to simply keep up with the person moving in front of the camera so that the framing of the character stays the same. Sometimes there is camera movement at the beginning or at the end of a sequence, but tracking shots that are meant to increase the drama, such as these, are very rare. A dramatic midpoint in the film is a sequence in which the ship is rolling in heavy seas. To illustrate this, the camera is swaying from side to side, just as in Chaplin's early silent film Shanghai, made 50 years earlier. As usual, Chaplin composed the soundtrack of the film with the help of an arranger. The soundtrack contains an instrumental version of what was to become a huge hit with added lyrics, "This Is My Song." Suitably for a film that takes place at sea, and also keeping with the theme of dance halls, the rest of the score revolves around a series of waltzes. Due to the unique setting for a Chaplin film, the music includes briefly Russian, Chinese and Hawaiian flavors. Also quite unusually for him, there are a couple of occasions where the music takes on a diegetic turn, that is, the background music is revealed to be coming supposedly from an on-screen source.
Excuse me, what will you have, ladies?
Champagne.
Champagne, champagne.
No, don't turn it off. Music complements the champagne.
Ladies, would you be seated?
The film premiered on January 2nd, 1967. The premiere itself was a disastrous affair. The cinema had a wrong lens on the projector, and as a result the image appeared distorted and broke down several times. This was something akin to an omen of what was to come. A Countess from Hong Kong was released in the spring of 1967, just as the rest of the world was preparing for the Summer of Love, the culmination point of countercultural hippie phenomenon. In the film world, this age also marked the end of old-fashioned industry-wide self-censorship. Many of the year's box office successes were a testament to the new, more cynical view of the world and the changing morals. Later that year featured the first time the F word was uttered in a mainstream film, a version of James Joyce's Ulysses. A gentle romantic comedy filmed in lavish sets represented the world of the older generation at its values. It seems as if A Countess from Hong Kong had no chance to win an audience. The first reviews were terrible. Chaplin was devastated by the harsh criticism he was now facing. He called the critics bloody idiots and decided to cut the film down for its distribution abroad. As a result, approximately 12 minutes were excised from the premiere version, including apparently this shot of Chaplin's Stewart character cleaning up the dance hall, which was originally to be the final shot of the film. Chaplin stated in an interview that the resulting shorter film didn't quite feel like his film anymore, and that he preferred the longer version. However, the shorter version is the only one available since the disastrous premiere. The cutting did nothing to save the film from critical and financial ruin. The reviews in the US were also harsh and personal. In recent years, the critical opinion towards A Countess from Hong Kong has shifted slightly. When mentioned nowadays, the film is still mostly regarded as a misfire, but the hostility of the earlier reviews is gone. At least one notable critic has defended it. Andrew Saris has listed A Countess from Hong Kong as one of the best films to come out in 1967. One of the reasons that the film, perhaps mercifully, has been forgotten is the fact that, unlike the other Chaplin feature films for which he was the producer, A Countess from Hong Kong is owned by Universal Pictures. As a result, the film is excluded from the DVD and Blu-ray packages featuring all the other feature films by Chaplin. Currently it is available on a bare-bones Universal DVD issued a few years ago. In the end, it seems that the most lasting aspect of the film is its music. This Is My Song, composed by Chaplin for the film, would become a huge international hit covered by several artists, especially Petula Clark, in different countries and different languages. Chaplin was uneasy with the success of the song when the film for which it was written for bombed. "They throw away the flesh of the peach," he said.
The world cannot be wrong if in this world there's you. I care not what the world may say. Without your love there is no day. So long.